Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with a bit of Total War Warhammer quick match gameplay. This time around I'm playing as the Warriors of Chaos against Norsca, led by von Karstein. On the map, Long Wheel. So right off the bat, gonna say that I think the Norsca versus Chaos matchup is a bit rough on Chaos. Similar to Undead, Chaos struggles with some of the very large units that Norsca can bring, like mammoths and skin wolves. They don't really have that many counters or anything to deal with them. And Chaos also doesn't have the best infantry trade-off, cost efficiency wise, because Marauder champions are very strong, and of course Berserkers are actually very cost efficient against something even like Forsaken. Or maybe not cost efficient, but they'll even perform decently against them, and of course they'll tear through Marauders. Chaos is very susceptible to Fear and Terror. So Chaos just has a bit of a rough time, I think, against Norsca. So I decided to kind of try some stuff out and see if it would work. My front line is entirely composed of Forsaken, with the center, or actually I suppose I should touch on the Lord first. I of course brought Kholek. Now, originally I was a bit of a toss-up because you need something to counter large. One of the best counters to Norscan large units, like mammoths in particular, are Dragon Ogres and Dragon Ogre Shaggoths. And they will beat one-on-one, even a normal Shaggoth. So I was a toss-up between bringing Kholek and bringing Sigvald and a Shaggoth, and I decided to just run to Kholek. Kholek, of course, coming in with all his abilities. He's Standard Die, which is the standard ground knockoff, Star Crusher, which does a whole bunch of damage, Deadly Onslaught for extra damage, and then Lord of the Storm, so he can nuke down a pocket of troops if they clump up. Alongside him is a Chaos Sorcerer of Fire. I didn't quite have the money for a to cram in Fireball, but I did bring Cascading Fire Cloak as well as Flaming Sword of Rune, and of course that good old Kindle Flame to boost all the damage when fire weaponry is being used. Front line composed of Forsaken, like mentioned before, and in the center here we do have the Demon Spew, who provide a debuff and a poison, which will help the trade, make the trade a little fairer. And behind them, the Weird Spawn, and the Weird Spawn were my main counter to enemy Marauder champions. Realizing that, of course, the Forsaken will lose to Marauder champions with great weapons. They'll tear through Marauders, for example, even with Marauders with great weapons, because there's such huge weapon strength that low armor infantry really can't stand against them. But against armor they'll struggle a lot, and so I decided to bring some Weird Spawn. The Weird Spawn of Armor Sundering, which will help them these units perform against units with good armor stats or decent armor stats. And then finally in the back, kind of a last reserve, Chaos Warriors with great weapons, a decent, fairly cheap unit with high armor values, so they'll beat up on something like Berserkers pretty easily, and still give me some armor piercing damage against something like Skin Wolves or Armored Skin Wolves, sorry, or that sort of stuff. Then 2 units of Chaos Knights out on the flanks, and these guys are just there to provide me with some mobility and a little bit of staying power. See, my opponent actually overcast Spirit Leech to get the extra range, so he can hit Kholek from all the way over there. That is definitely a bit of a problem for me if I get surely get whittled down by Spirit Leech. There's of course a chance that that Kholek will resist the damage, and he doesn't take too much there. He loses about 400 HP, but nonetheless, it isn't good because Kholek is my only chance against my opponent's Lord on Mammoth. So my opponent brought for his heroes, or for his Lord, he brought a Marauder Chieftain on a Mammoth. Nothing fancy. He actually didn't even bring Standard Die, which you usually see. But he's very tanky, of course, can dish out a lot of hurt, and has some pretty crazy weapon strength and all that sort of stuff. The usual Mammoth, essentially, minus throwing spears and slightly better melee stats. Alongside him, Chaos Sorcerer of Death, coming in with Fated Beauty and Spirit Leech, as well as a what is this scroll? A Scroll of Power, so reduces ability recharge. And then for his front line, he does have 4 units of Marauder Berserkers. Actually, I don't believe any Brutes of the Hound, which is a bit interesting. You usually see those; they're almost a must pick. But these guys will trade fairly well with squishy Chaos Infantry. And then Marauder Hunters was champs behind that, and Marauder Hunters was champions. You can see the overcast Spirit Leech going down on poor Kholek over there. But it does, at least this time around, damage the Chaos Shaman Sorcerer of Death. The Marauder Hunters with Jabs will crush any large that Chaos can bring pretty efficiently. On the flanks, he does have Marauder Spearmen, just to tie down any large they bring. These guys are actually a big threat to Kholek, despite the fact that Kholek got a significant armor buff recently, up to 100, and he does have some built-in missile resistance, I do believe 25%. And then the back line, my opponent has his main anti-large component. He has 2 of them. He has 2 units of Videl Skin Wolves over here on the left, or on my left flank, and then Norscan Ice Wolves and the Maws of Savagery on the right, or in the right back. I'm going to throw things into full speed. I've kind of moved up into this woodland here. And Kholek took a massive beating from that second Spirit Leech. As you can see, there's a bit of RNG involved in how well your Lord resists. And unfortunately, I don't get the charge bonus here on the Marauder Chieftain. And he does get his charge bonus, so he's going to get a big hit there on Kholek. But Kholek is having none of it and smacks the guy in the face with his hammer. And once the charge bonus wears off on the Mammoth, Kholek is actually going to trade very effectively because he has very, very high melee defense relatively to the Mammoth. And he hits very hard. Kholek can out-trade a Mammoth pretty easily, though at this stage I actually wasn't confident that Kholek could win because he'd already taken all that Spirit Leech damage. I do pop Cascading Fire Cloak on him to boost his damage a little bit and to give him some more resilience. The Weird Spawn are pushing in to help deal with the Marauder Berserkers. They'll actually do pretty well, but they're very susceptible to jab fire. He's the Marauder Chieftain over here trying to fight Kholek, and Kholek is actually trading very well already. Forsaken are just piling in. Over here, though, my Chaos Knights, due to the fact that I was so focused on my center micro here, I let my Chaos Knights, who I was trying to flank with, get caught by Skin Wolves on one end, and the Maws of Savagery on the other. And they are losing pretty badly here. This is not an ideal situation for the Chaos Knights, and they didn't get their charge bonus off either, which makes things even worse for them. Over here you can see I'm calling down a Stormcaller on these guys, and it does a little bit of damage. It disrupts the Norsca Ice Wolves a little bit, but it's not nowhere near enough. It would probably be better spent on these Javelins. But now that my opponent's front line is completely buckling, my opponent's Marauder Chieftain has been routed off, and I'm pursuing him with a good old Kholek over here. And things are just kind of going down here in the center. Weird Spawn are tearing through my opponent's infantry line, who are losing and will shortly start routing. My opponent's Shaman Sorcerer of Death has actually broken, and my Marauder Chaos Warriors, who I kind of kept in reserve this whole time, and because I was not top of my micro, are finally getting an opportunity to push forward. On the right flank, Knights are broken. On the left flank, Knights are broken. Kholek is chasing down the Mammoth, and one of the problems, of course, with the Chaos Knights is they're not fast enough to outrun even Maws of Savagery or Armored Skin Wolves, much less unarmored Skin Wolves. They're just very slow. So as far as cav is concerned, they are shock cav, of course. So they can't outrun them, or not very easily, and and especially not with the Frost Wolves there. Over here, though, the Weird Spawn are plowing into the Maws of Savagery. This is nowhere near a good fight for the Weird Spawn, but with the support of these Forsaken, I'm hoping to get some use out of them and just try to beat these guys down a little bit. And the Weird Spawn are trading somewhat well. They're getting a little bit of damage. They have very high weapon strength. They have armor sundering, so they'll make these guys a little weaker and let the Forsaken do a little bit of work. Unfortunately, my Weird Spawn's already down 2 models. Over on the left flank, though, the Skin Wolves thought they could take on a bunch of Forsaken. That's not going to happen. Skin Wolves, for as much as they're talked up about how good they're against infantry, will not do well against armored units like Forsaken that dish out ridiculous amounts of hurt. As you can see, these guys are having a very bad day against the Forsaken, and now the Chaos Warriors are coming back, and they are going to put the smackdown on these guys if they catch them. Kholek, in the meantime, has got caught by the Norscan Ice Wolves. A little bit of overconfidence here. I thought that I was confident that Kholek would just charge into him and rout him off with terror, and that did not quite happen here. So they're actually getting a decent amount of damage, and of course these guys have very high damage output. And unfortunately, Kholek almost dies there, but he is still alive. But only almost. He did, of course, beat down the Mammoth. These Chaos Knights are wavering, but they are coming back. I have a second unit of Chaos Knights coming on the back line on the other flank, who are kind of just being slow. I'm not entirely on top of my micro. I do drop another Lord of the Storm over here on the Marauder Berserkers and Javelins and Spears, who are getting torn through by the Weird Spawn. My opponent's Skin Wolves, I don't have anything to chase them down, so they keep disengaging and regenerating and then coming back into the fray. Fortunately, one of the few remaining good factors here is that my Chaos Warriors with great weapons, despite being winded, are in very good shape. They've taken hardly any damage. And they can tank out something like Javelins, for example. I just have to be very careful with Kholek, because if Kholek gets assassinated, things will go very, very poorly for me. You can see some of my opponent's units are recovering. You can see the Skin Wolves coming back over here. I'm going to try to just vanilla Skin Wolves, and it's a little bit of a weird route here. And then these Norscan Ice Wolves are coming back. And Maws of Savagery do start pushing in on me, but I forced the Chaos Sorcerer of Fire into him to duel him. Over here, the poor Weird Spawn are getting badly mauled. I do pop a Cascading Fire Cloak to defend him a little bit. The Forsaken trading as best they can against, what is it over here? Some more Skin Wolves. And you can see the Skin Wolves over here plowing towards Kholek, trying to get on top of him. The Forsaken intercept and are going to try to beat him down. Forsaken are not bad against Skin Wolves. They do quite a bit of hurt. Now the Skin Wolves are trying to get on top of Kholek, I think. It wouldn't be surprising. So I turn and face him, realizing that Kholek can't really run away from him. But fortunately at this point my opponent's army does shatter, and due to army losses and loss of leadership, and that is a game in my favor. So, a bit of a close fight. Came right down to the wire. The only strong units, now it looks like the Weird Spawn were really high. I kind of don't like that in the end game screen. It only shows, the bar essentially shows how many models were left, not how much HP was left. unless it's a single model hero. These weird spawn are practically annihilated. These Forsaken, the Demons 2, were really badly beat up, and so were these Forsaken. The only unit that was actually this healthy was the Chaos Warriors with Great Weapons, who took practically no damage throughout most of this. And my opponent's army was very badly designed to take on a heavily armored unit like Chaos Warriors with Great Weapons. Once the Marauder Chieftain and the Muzzle Savagery were kind of driven off. Those were the two biggest threats to him, and once those were dealt with, they were just kind of doomed. The Forsaken, of course, trading immensely, very, very well with the Marauder Berserkers. Absolutely annihilated them. The Chaos Knights are absolutely terrible. They got tag teamed by Skinwolves on one end, tag teamed by Muzzle Savagery and Frostwolves on the other. So absolutely atrocious trade, and they got practically annihilated. So, and that was a lot of that came down to my bad micro more than anything else. Kholek performed very well at shutting down the enemy lord and outdueling him, in spite of the fact that he got double tapped with Spirit Leech beforehand. Still did well. Chaos Sorcerer of Fire providing some decent buffs, and then later on helping deal with the Muzzle Savagery and all that sort of stuff. Enemy Chaos Shaman Sorcerer of Death got swamped and driven off fairly quickly, and that was a pretty big win there. And yeah, the Weird Spawn did pretty well too. 81 kills, not bad. Definitely helped break that front line. My opponent, the Javelins, didn't get too much done. I think initially I think they were focused on Kholek, and later on they were focused on the Weird Spawn, but they got shut. Once my opponent's front line started cracking, or his spears started getting distracted, I was able to just plow through with Forsaken, and again his back. And Forsaken will tear through these guys very quickly. Spears didn't get too much done. The Muzzle Savagery and Skinwolves performed very well, but once again, these guys are not that good against high DPS infantry like Forsaken. Forsaken against Skinwolves is pretty favorable to Forsaken. Even Dryads actually will do very well against Skinwolves, because there's Dryads with their magic damage and and the fact that Skinwolves rely on physical resistance for a lot of their survivability. They'll get torn apart by common Dryads. So yeah, it's definitely not the best choice, but it can just shut down this heavy stuff very easily. But yeah, good game to my opponent. I do hope it was a very tight match. I do hope you guys enjoyed this game. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. If you have any comments, criticism, any questions about Total War Warhammer, or any suggestions for matchups you'd like to see, or units you'd like to see demonstrated, that sort of stuff, comps, be sure to post those down below, and I'll respond as soon as I can. As usual, guys, I do appreciate you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Wyvern out.